are some of the worst issues that you had to deal with as a young woman?
I would say one of the most difficult situations and experiences that I had to deal with was stop living my life trying to please others, especially when I was living my life trying to please my father. Even when he had passed on, I was still trying to live my life to please him. And that caused so many problems because I always wanted to be the perfect child and a perfect adult and seen in its perfect light because I was verbally abused as a child growing up, and I wanted to do everything to avoid being verbally abused and to be good enough and smart enough and pretty enough and just be enough where I wouldn't get those attacks from my dad, right? So when I got older, I would do those same things to myself. I would verbally abuse myself. I would tell myself I wasn't good enough. I would feel like I wasn't good enough because this was something that was embedded in me when I was a kid. And it stayed with me when I was an adult.
Okay. At what point did, or let me ask you this, who was it the hardest to tell that you had a sexual preference to? Like, who was that person that maybe, I don't know if you had to, like, struggle, like, how am I going to say this? Did you have to deal with that at all?
I think if my parents were still alive, that would have been them. But being that they had passed on already, when I met my wife and when we were gonna get married and everything, that was the hard part that I had to deal with. But honestly, myself. I would say myself because I was fighting and battling myself. There was like two, how people say it, like I was straddling the fence, right? And I knew what my heart wanted. I knew what my heart desired. I knew what made me happy. I knew what made me feel loved. I know what made me feel free. But I was worried about being that perfect person, being seen in that perfect light. So to come to terms and face myself and tell myself, this is you, this is who you are, this is what you want, and it's okay. And guess what? You're perfectly imperfect. And it's okay. And forget whoever don't like it, right? Because they're going to have something to say, living my life that they think I should or living a life they think I shouldn't, right? So I think the most difficult conversation to have was with myself.
Give me a detailed example of trauma. You talk about trauma a lot, and give me a detailed example of what happened to you that you can remember that has affected you all these years.
So, domestic violence is one of the common themes throughout my life. There are multiple different experiences, but the first experience I could remember is witnessing my mother being physically abused by my father. I remember her sitting and laying in her puddles of blood as her ribs was broken and her nose was fractured and these things, and trying to take care of her, but being torn between loving my dad for who he was to me and how he treated me, but also hating him for what he did to my mother. But then not too long after that, me experiencing my first sexual abuse at the age of 5 when my mother wanted us to run from that situation and wanted to be set free. So she took us to my great aunt's house. And at my great aunt's house, her husband used to molest me. Every time I would come out the shower, he would make me come in his room, right? And my great aunt would lead me in his room, like basically leading me into the devil's hands. And I would be molested at the age of 5. And that was my first personal experience. But then right after that, once my mother figured out what's happening, she subjected herself back to pain to save me from pain. And those themes of physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and even mental abuse followed me throughout my life in different experiences. So that was my first experience that stuck with me, seeing that my mom was willing to subject herself to more pain to lessen mine, which ultimately I felt like I had to do the same for others. So.
And you said you were in an abusive situation too, right?
Correct.
Do you think seeing your mom being abused led you into an abusive situation, or you just picked the wrong one?
No, absolutely. I believe it had a direct effect. I learned how to be a woman from my mother. I learned what love was from my parents. And what I saw them do and how they carried on, I thought that was love. I thought, okay, my mom is taken care of. She has the nicest cars, all of the jewelry, the biggest house. She has it all going on. But behind closed doors, she's being abused verbally, being abused physically. She's being abused mentally, right? But as long as she had all the glamorous things that she wanted, what she needed didn't matter. So I grew up, because that was internalized in me, I grew up choosing those same people. As long as I'm taken care of, as long as I feel good, right, on the outside, as long as all of the physical and materialistic things is taken care of, that doesn't matter. And not only my mother experiencing those things was a direct correlation, I start doing those things to myself. So my dad would verbally abuse my mom, so I picked up verbally abusing myself. So him telling her she's not good enough and she's nothing, I start telling myself I wasn't good enough and I wasn't nothing. So I only put myself in situations that I have already experienced, which was at home, or I allow people to do the same thing I was doing to myself. I abused myself, so the person in front of me abused me also. So I think there was a direct correlation, not only to what I experienced with my mom, but what I absorbed being around it.
So there's a woman in that situation right now, abusive situation, they know that they're better than that, right? But for some reason, they just stay. What type of advice would you give them?
Honestly, it's in the situation, speaking from personal experience, in those situations, it is extremely hard to hear anyone else that's not in a situation. I would plead and beg for them to open their eyes, right? But it's the switch that has to happen on the inside. It's the feeling of I'm sick of being sick and tired has to happen, right? It's the feeling of I want more. I wish that every woman in that situation, and even men that's in that situation, would finally take their power back, or if not take their power back, gain some power. Gain the strength to know that you deserve more, to know that you are more, to know that you can do way more than where you are now, that this person is powerless. That's why they're trying to take your power away. You have the real power. And if you take that same power and just stand up for yourself, and that stand up for yourself doesn't necessarily mean to fight back physically or verbally. That stand up for yourself may just be saying, this is it. This moment is the last moment, and leaving, right? And just knowing that you are more, you mean more, and there's somebody out there that's willing to listen to your story. There's somebody out there that's willing to love you unconditionally. There's someone out there that you can help. But first, we have to help ourselves. You have to get out of it. You have to just let go. But I think the number one thing that's important in that situation is forgiving yourself. Because when we're in that situation, we of course blame others, but we beat up on ourselves so much that it doesn't make the situation any better. We say, we put ourselves here. We chose this person. I'm the reason this is here. Or I'm stupid. This is why he's treated me this way. Or I'm less than. This is why I chose this, right? And if we forgive ourselves and let ourselves be free of that guilt, of that shame, of that embarrassment, and walk away, it's a fresh start. And the fresh start is waiting on you.